Hello, everybody. It's Jason and Destiny. Today we are joined by George Buza. George, how are you doing this fine, cold day?
Very cold. Wearing my old man sweater and my thermal undies.
It's the best way to do it when it's this cold.
Oh, it's terrible.
Very nice. So, what made you want to be an actor? What got you interested?
Well, up until my senior year in high school, I hadn't even seen a play in my life. And I went to an all boys school. And around the corner, there was an all girls school. And my girlfriend went there. And they were putting on a senior class play, and they needed guys to audition for roles. So I got talked, forced into going in and auditioning. And I read for the part of Oliver, or of Mr. Bumble in Oliver, and I got the part. And it was a lot of fun, you know. But the moment that I stepped out on stage that opening night, it was like some sort of interstellar lightning that struck me that said, wow, this is what I want to do. It was that definite and that quick. And then from that moment on, I pursued it. I started going around for the rest of the year, auditioning at all the other girls' schools in Cleveland to be in their plays as well. And then I did my senior class play. And then I went to Baldwin-Wallace for my undergrad and majored in theater. And then did my master's at Kent in directing and got my equity card in Trumpet in the Land. You know that play down in New Philadelphia?
Nice. I do.
Have you ever seen it?
I have not.
You've got to go down there. Like, this is going back, well, that was 1974, so that's 52 years ago. But it's this outdoor theater, and the play is about the settlement of Ohio and the battle between the Indians and the Amish people that settled there. And it's a huge amphitheater outdoors, seats over 1,700 people, and they recreate an actual battle on stage. There's this huge field in the background and everything. We got real muskets, and we're blasting each other with. It was great.
So the first thing I want to ask you about is, it says here that you played a bartender on SCTV, which
SCTV, that was when John Mellencamp was a guest.
Yeah, they had an amazing cast. What was that experience like on that show?
Well, that led to an awfully long relationship with SCTV, because I did several episodes of when they were doing the skit show, and then they produced Maniac Mansion. Eugene Levy was the executive producer, and I played a 4-year-old mutated kid in that. And then they did another movie called The Canadian Conspiracy, and I had got a part in that. And then they did Sodbusters with Chris Christopherson. It was the SCTV spoof on Shane, and I had a major part in that. So I've had a long relationship with all the people at SCTV, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. They're wonderful, wonderful people. And again, it's, sad. Everybody's getting old. Joe Flaherty's gone. It's we're all getting to be old farts.
Love that.
Three geeks. This is three geezers.
That's funny.
Funny. That is very funny.
We've got to do some incredible voice acting as well as films and television. What do you find is the biggest difference in how you approach those roles?
Well, as an actor, you approach everything pretty much the same. It's just the techniques that you use. When you're millimeters away from a microphone, you don't really have to project. Like when you're on stage, and especially in that very first major show that I did, Trumpet in the Land, you've got to be able to project so that the people way in the back can hear you as clearly as the people in the front row. So you've got a different technique to do stage than you do doing film. In film, it's the camera that gets close up to you. You don't project to the camera. It comes and it finds you, and the microphones all mic you. So you have to bring everything farther down so you don't blow the ears off the sound technician who's sitting there with his microphones on. Do you remember the Goulardi on WJW TV?
I do,
To do
actually.
he used to put firecrackers next to his microphone and blow the ears off the guys in the studio. And his catchphrase used to be, "Cool it with the boom booms." These guys would have firecracker wars during the taping of the show. The great stuff.
That's no, that is super funny. What was Alfred Hitchcock Presents like?
Well, I only did one episode of that. It was fun. It was like I used to watch Alfred Hitchcock when I was a kid with my grandfather. He used to like that show a lot. They all watched the mysteries, that and Dragnet. And it was really neat. I got to be in the Twilight Zone. We did resurrected that series up here as well. I did an episode of that. I mean, it's a lot different than if I would have been, in with Rod Serling and, all the original people from there. I mean, that's where even William Shatner did a very early episode of the Twilight Zone. And all the great actors appeared on that.
I want to get into some specific roles, but my question, because a lot of people, especially when they do voice acting, they tend to specialize in voice acting and they don't really do a whole lot of on-screen stuff. But you do both.
I do everything.
What makes
to me, when I was starting off, the guy who was my mentor back in 1971, I did the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival, which is where I did my apprenticeship. And the guy who was my mentor there was Robert Englund, who played Freddy Krueger. And we were both young actors. He just got his equity card a year or two before. And he was telling me, he says, you've got to learn as many skills as you possibly can to survive in this business. You can't just limit yourself because you'll put yourself out of work. He says, you got to be able to do absolutely everything. Learn all the skills you can. Branch out into all the different fields. And you'll keep working. And so that's what I did. I learned as many things as I possibly could. I tried to deluge myself with reality. I mean, I worked downtown Cleveland when I got out of university. I was down there working all the clubs as a bouncer and security guard. And I ended up working for Larry Flint as a bodyguard. It was some wild times, and all that was to gain experience so that when you were going there to play bad guys, you kind of had a vision of, what it was like to be one. And I had to get out of there because that was reality. There was no getting out of that. There was high stakes stuff because they weren't props that you were dealing with. I carried a real gun. People who I was having confrontations with also had real guns. It wasn't like props. And when there was a fight, nobody pulled their punches. And it got really real. And that's when I kind of woke up and go, all right, you've gained a little bit of experience here, but you're getting deeper and deeper into the underbelly of Cleveland. And it's time to get out of it and get back to what you're supposed to do, which is be an actor. And that's when I went back to graduate school and did my master's at Kent. And that led to Trumpet in the Land and my equity card. And that led to Canada. Everything was kind of like a domino because the director of Trumpet in the Land was a Canadian. And then I got invited up to Canada to do a play at the end of the season. And then while I was up here, I got offered 2 years worth of work. And they said, it's a real pain in the butt to keep getting you work permits. So why don't you apply to become a permanent resident and then you can just work up here. So that's what I did. And that was 52 years ago. But, the more talent, the more avenues that you open up. You do commercials, you do animation, live stage, movies, TV. And that also keeps you very active and your brain active. People sometimes tend to find one theater that they work in, like Cleveland Playhouse, for example, has got actors there that have been there since the beginning. The ones that are still alive, you find a place that you're secure and you don't have to audition anymore. You just live out you've got a job for the rest of your life and off you go. The same thing with the Stratford Festival. People there have been there for decades. And, they change around the cast year after year, but it's a secure place. Once you find that, you go, geez, I got a job now and let's ride it out until the end.
Definitely. Yeah, some people just take that job security.
Yeah, but I loved the variety. I loved going from a film to theater to doing animation. I mean, when we were doing Maniac Mansion, I was recording X-Men at the same time. So the studios were about 2-3 miles apart downtown, and I'd be filming dressed up as a 4-year-old kid. And then I'd have to go and do an episode of X-Men. So I'd still be dressed up in my wardrobe, hop on my motorcycle, and drive through downtown Toronto and knock off an episode of X-Men and go back and finish filming on Maniac Mansion.
I'm sure that was a sight to see.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But, yeah, this is what you did. It made it all fun. And
speaking of X-Men, what was it like to get the call 20-some years later to come back?
Well, that was a mind blower. When Eric and Julia Leewald wrote the book on previously on X-Men, then they gathered 4 of us together and we went down to New Braunfels, Texas, and we did our very first Comic-Con. And it was Cal Dodd, Lenore Zan, myself, and Tony Daniels. And we were talking about how nice it was to get back together. We hadn't seen each other in a long time. And then how nice it would be if they resurrected the show. And that was back in about 2018, I think, when we did that. And we all kind of laughed it off, going, yeah, well, that'll never happen. And then we got hit with the pandemic, and then we all stopped doing the Comic-Cons. And so all of a sudden, we got a call from the agency saying they want you back. Mind you, we did have to re-audition for our original roles. But after 30 years, they want to see if you still sound the same and you're not there going,
Seems surreal.
When X-Men 97 came out, I went back and rewatched the original X-Men cartoon because I loved it growing up. But I was just floored by how ahead of its time it was for a children's television program to be serialized. And as serialized as that show was, like, you had to watch it all to really get the full, like, impact of the story. And then for the new one to come out and really literally pick up moments later, like, it was just, the animation does look better, but it also looks the same. And it's awesome how they got that mix of making it look like it's new, but also looking like it's the same.
Yeah, well, when Saban was running it, they went for the bottom dollar. So they animated it in Korea, then they went to the Philippines, wherever. That's why there was a big difference in seasons on what the animation looked like. But now that Disney's got a hold of it, they're putting everything they got into making it look absolutely perfect. This is, the quality of it is like Fantasia. Back when the real classic cartoons were being made into feature films and all animated by hand. I still remember watching all those fabulous Disney films and Fantasia. I mean, for, anybody who grew up during the hippie era, that was the movie to see when you were tripping. All those dancing hippos.
Best. Going into some more character-specific things, you also got to play in Ginny and Georgia, which has become such a huge hit. How was the character of Marty?
Well, it's still going on. I just did an episode last week.
Nice.
And the week before that, I did
ask if you
one.
could tell us if you got to return or not.
I did. They brought me back. I seem to be doing like 1 or 2 episodes a season. Perfect. And, I keep getting older, so I don't know how long it's going to play. I went from actually doing a lot of the bad guy stuff to now overseeing a lot of the bad guy stuff. So this is what happens. You become the boss. But I love that show. The people are so nice, and it's a great thing, being a biker in your mid-70s and still trying to throw your weight around.
Did you actually ride prior?
Oh, I've been riding. I rode for 50 years. I just gave it up a couple of years ago because the arthritis got so bad. I pulled the bike out of the garage. I could barely hold it up. And I couldn't throw my leg over it. And then it looked like I was getting on it very, very embarrassingly. And I thought, no, I can't do this anymore. And besides, once the arthritis gets you and you don't have 100% of your hands and feet, You don't have a chance out there because Toronto's got over 4 million people, and I think about 2 of them know how to drive. So you're really taking your life into your hands, going out there practically naked, wearing a leather jacket and nothing else between you and the road. And I've had a couple of spills. I've been put back together. I set off the metal detector at the airport. But it was a good 50 years of riding. So I rode all through Africa.
Oh, wow.
Because when we were shooting Sinbad, that was done in South Africa. The Adventures of Sinbad. So I spent 2 years down there. And the first thing I did was I got to buy and sell and started looking for motorcycles. And I bought one down there. And the guys that were in a club called the Easy Riders, one of their guys was my stunt double. So they helped me put the bike back on the road as a nice touring. The guy was using it as a racing bike that I bought it off of. So we made it a tourer again, and it was a rat bike, but I had a lot of fun. That was one of my things on the bucket list. When I was in Africa in 1980, we were shooting Quest for Fire, and I had some time at the end of the shoot to go and tour around, so I rented a car, and we went down to Mombasa. And the roads were kind of neat, They didn't have the same kind of pockmarked freeze and thaw potholes as we do in North America. So they were quite smooth until they ended and turned to mud. But when you had pavement, it was level. And South Africa is a much richer country than Kenya. So their roads were a lot better. And they had super highways. And I got to tour around the whole bottom of Cape Province. And I encountered a lot of African wildlife. The way you tour around in the States and you run into moose and elk and deer and all the other things up north. There, they had elephant crossings. And I ran over a puff adder once because it was lying in the middle of the road sunning. And then baboons took over the entire road. And I had to slow down to like 5 miles an hour and go around them like I was taking my riding test around pylons, except these were baboons. So it was quite exciting, to be able to putt through South Africa and experience that.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
It was fabulous.
Sorry. How do you find your voice? Like for Little Bear, they say you're going to play Frog. Like, how do you find the voice for that?
Well, you look at the character and you kind of try and get an idea of what he would sound like, and then you run the ideas you have past the director, and then they find which one they like the best. A Little Bear was fun too. All the cartoons, I love animation. Sometimes it can be pretty hard on your voice though when they want you to do some, guttural noises and screams and everything like that. You can come out of there quite hoarse.
Are there any types of characters or genres that you still want to explore that maybe you haven't got to yet?
Well, not really. There was a long list of things that I wanted to do when I was younger, and I did a lot of them. But now I'm pretty much retired. The only things that I'm really maintaining now is I still do Ginny and Georgia because I'm committed to it, and I do X-Men. But, they approach me every now and then with some sort of project, and if it's on camera, I'll probably say no right away because the days are tormentingly long. Even a short day on Ginny and Georgia for me was like 12 hours long. And, that's taxing. Not everybody can do that into their old age. And I love doing X-Men. I mean, the longest session I've had on that show has been an hour. I mean, once you got it, you go into the studio and you give them 3 takes of each line. And they go, okay, moving on. And occasionally they say, okay, let's go back and see if we can fine tune that. But usually after 3 takes, they've got what they want and you're on your way in about an hour.
I know it's kind of like picking a favorite child, but do you have a favorite role?
Well, in animation, definitely it'd have to be Beast. Now, there's 2 favorite roles that I had, actually 3. One in the movies. My favorite role was Santa in Christmas Horror Story. That was like the last real action movie that I did, And even
That's
the
a good
New
one.
York Times in their review said, and Santa was quite spry for his age.
Love
So
that.
that one would be my favorite movie role. And then in TV, the ones that are like the best was Sinbad playing Dubar, and then Jake in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the next door neighbor. Working with Peter Scolari was one of the blessings of my career. I've never met a nicer man, more generous actor, and a funnier guy. And the two of us really, really hit it off. They kind of compared us to Laurel and Hardy when we were shooting the thing, and they wrote stuff that was in that vein so that we could do the interactions and have the fun. And I spent so much time sitting in front of or standing in front of an air cannon, having things fired at me, the slime, rotten vegetables, all kinds of spaghetti, you name it, and it exploded in my face. But it was so much fun. Those 2 years, they went by like a flash. And now
That was such
Peter,
a
he's
fun
gone
show.
too. Pardon?
I said that was such a fun show, Honey, I
Yeah.
Shrunk the Kids.
So, you did conventions and all. Do you have like a crazy or just really fun, very memorable fan interaction?
Well, that's the most moving fan interaction. I mean, you get fun stuff all the time, people dressing up as Beast. And I always have to take my hat off to that because I have been painted blue and I know what it's like. And it doesn't come off easy. And you also have this kind of blue tinge that you carry around with you for a few days afterwards. And when people show up doing a Beast cosplay, I always have to go out of my way to be especially nice to them because I know what they went through to get there. But again, the most moving is when people come and tell you what that show meant to them, and how your character, in many instances, actually saved their lives. There were people that came up to us that said, if it wasn't for your show, I wouldn't be here today. They found that they could not operate within society. They were outcasts. They had nowhere that they fit in, and they just rushed home every day to watch the latest episode of X-Men, and that's where they found their refuge. And the show hit them so deeply that a lot of them didn't go through with, the depression that was going to drive them to perhaps take their own life. And people would show up and they would be in tears when they come to our table. And this is something that is so heart-wrenching because we had never had any idea how much our show meant to people. Fox Kids and Saban never shared any of the fan mail that came through because this is a ploy, too, to keep actors on their toes. You never know that you can take this job for granted.
Yeah.
They would keep us hanging until the very last second to tell us whether we were going to be renewed for another season. They never shared any of the fan mail. So we never knew the popularity of the show. And it wasn't until we started doing the Comic-Cons and the fans who are now middle-aged adults would come and tell us that this show saved their life. And that's mind-blowing. And it really it hits you very, very deeply. Very few actors can say that, a performance that they did meant that much to somebody that affected their lives. Most of the stuff you do as an actor in your career is fluff. You're doing mysteries or whatever. You're entertaining people, amusing them for a couple of hours, making them laugh. But to actually have that kind of an impact on somebody's life, that's something else. I don't know of any other show that has that kind of power besides what X-Men had.
Yeah, X-Men dealt with and continues to deal with some
and
real
continues
things.
to, because the world is much worse right now than it was back in '96. Much worse.
100%. And I remember watching X-Men as a child, and yeah, it's nice to see, different people together fighting, for what's right, and nobody is an outcast, especially in that X-Men group, no matter if you're blue or have, rays that shoot out of your eyes. And it still resonates today. I mean, the allegory on racism back then and the other stuff that's going on now, it's such a powerful show still. And even the comic books, it's wild.
Yeah, I do think that's why it resonates, is because, there's so many real life things that can make you feel like an outcast, and X-Men kind of makes you feel like you're part of something.
Yeah, well, I identified very, very deeply with the character of Beast because when I was a kid growing up in Cleveland, I was an outcast. My parents were refugees from Hungary after World War II. They came over on the Liberty ships. I was born shortly thereafter, and I didn't speak English until I was 4 because my parents didn't speak English, so we spoke Hungarian at home. And I learned English out playing with the kids. And they weren't very kind either because I was also a fat kid. So there was a lot of things that were, going against me when I went to school, and I wasn't a very happy kid. And I got bullied on the school grounds, even despite the fact that I was a big kid. That was also something like of a challenge that, let's go after the big guy and, see if we can make him cry or see if we can give him a black eye. And I took it for a very, very long time. And then one day I decided that I was going to fight back. And the guy that came at me, I dropped him like a stone. And I even shocked myself. I go, holy mackerel, what was that?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden things turned, and people kind of stopped bullying me, although it went on for a little while because then they wanted to see the fight. They go, okay, he's ready now. And that back then, what they would do is the guy that wanted to fight you would create this circle. So the whole schoolyard would come and form a circle around you. And the one guy that wanted to beat the crap out of you would suddenly be there and you had nowhere to go. And it was, fight or fight, there was no fight or flight. There was nowhere to flight.
Yeah, I was a bully kid too, so I get it. I can relate to that very much. I was not a big kid though. I was skinny.
Well, I was fat, I wasn't a bundle of muscle. I was a fat kid. And that's the way they treated me. I still hate that, Georgie Porgy, and all that, that rhyme and being called fatso and, that hurts. But, I got over it. And this is also probably one of the reasons why I thrived going into theater, because I found that I could get people, instead of to laugh at me, they would laugh with me, that I could make them laugh as opposed to just walk into a room and by my appearance, encourage mockery. All of a sudden they treated you a little bit differently because you were a performer and you could hide within the character that you were playing and amuse them. And, you use that kind of like as a shield against a lot of the negativity that would potentially be thrown your way.
You've had an amazing career and you've worked with some amazing people. Like I said, the Alfred Hitchcock show. What was it like on Diary of the Dead? Being part of that legacy?
Well, I had such a tiny, tiny little part. I had a very short interaction with George Romero. He gave me the cameo, and then we had a little conversation. He says, there's a very funny stuff. You're doing really a great job. He says, we're going to have to do something in the future. We're going to do something together. And then he passed away. So I never got the chance to actually work deeply with him in something with had more meat to it. It was a fun one-day little cameo. That was about it.
That is awesome.
I wish there was more.
That he wanted to work with you more in the future. I mean, that's sad it didn't happen because the man was a legend. But I mean, that's still a cool story that you get to take with you.
Well, I also got to work with Guillermo del Toro in the Strain, and there I had a little more interaction with him. I had a better part in a whole episode. He was also a very exciting director to work with. I've always admired his work. The biggest star the first star that I worked with when I did my very first TV show was Flip Wilson. It was the Flip Wilson Salute to Football. It was back in like 1977, 76, something like that. And I was like starstruck, just starstruck by that. And then shortly thereafter, I got on High Point, which was, I think, 78. I got to work with Richard Harris and Beverly D'Angelo and Christopher Plummer, all in the same movie. And Dar Robinson, this is the one where he jumped off the CN Tower with a parachute on his back. So, and when I did the Descending Angel to work with George C. Scott, as an actor, these are the things that when I was a kid watching these movies and watching him as Patton, never imagined that, the time would come when I'd actually be on stage, work or on screen with him. It was very difficult to, be normal.
Well, George, I want to thank you so much for joining us. What you got coming up?
Well, right now, just that I've been doing 2 episodes of X-Men next week. And then in May, I'm going to Liverpool for another Comic-Con. Looking forward to that because I'm a huge Beatles fan. I got to meet Paul McCartney as well. Back when in the early 70s or mid 70s, when I came to Canada, again, I was doing theater. You don't make a lot of money. So as soon as the show ended, I'd go off and be a bouncer in a bar. And one of the bars that I was working at, the guy who ran security for Concert Productions International was a regular there. And he said, we could use a guy your size. He says, how would you like to see a bunch of shows for nothing and get paid? Sounds good to me. So the first show that I did was Paul McCartney and Wings. Wow. And I got to be there for their entire sound check, the entire day. And then because I was the biggest guy on the crew, they put me on stage to make sure that nobody rushed the stage. So I'm sitting like 2 feet away from Paul McCartney and 2 feet away from Linda McCartney, right in the middle. They were being intimidating like this, just sitting there. And I watched the entire concert. Nobody got up out of their seat. Nobody rushed the stage. And I sat there for the entire concert, just blown away, And then I got to meet Paul, and it was just amazing. So now to be able to go to Liverpool and explore, I want to see the cavern where they used to play and the Beatles Museum. So those are on the agenda. And then we're going to take a train trip up. I got to see Stratford. I want to see the Globe Theater where this all began.
Yeah, that'll be a really cool trip.
So that's on the agenda.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite Beatle? Is it Paul McCartney?
Yeah. Well, no, actually, John Lennon. I really like John Lennon.
Lennon's mine too. His voice is just, and him and McCartney together, just in general, is fantastic. Yeah. But
oh yeah, the John songs Lennon, that they wrote. I mean, those were the first songs that I learned when I started playing guitar. Were Beatles songs. I still have the sheet music that you could buy in the music stores for all their albums. They put out an entire book of all the songs. That's and the cool. Chords and the notations.
Real quick, do you have a favorite song and album?
She Loves You. I used to listen to that on my 2-transistor radio in my little closet, which we turned into I shared a room with my younger brother. So we had walk-in closets on either side of our rooms. And I would always go in there. They had a little desk so I could do my homework. And I had a little 2-transistor radio. And they'd play She Loves You, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'd be singing along. And then my friend who lived across the street, we'd put on Beatles records down in his basement. And his parents had these giant fork and spoon that they had on either side of the fireplace. And we'd use them and play air guitar.
Those are always good memories.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And they, when you get to be my age, these are the things that keep coming back into your head. All the memories from your childhood and, growing up, all the friends. And I still see them. Every time I go down to Cleveland, we get together and reminisce about the old days and talk about all our medical experiences now.
It's funny that you mentioned Three Geezers because one of my co-hosts on the podcast is a guy I've known since I was 5. And so we're like in mid-40s now. So we're getting there. We're going to be 3 old men on this podcast at some point.
My friend Jim, he and I have known each other since we were like 5 or 6 as well. And, when we're now in our mid-70s. So that's a long, long friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, George, thank you so much. Where can everybody find you online?
Nowhere. I don't have any presence. I don't do any social media. You know,
You have a happy life then. If you're on
Yeah.
social media, that's
I try to
amazing.
keep it as stress-free as I possibly can. You know,
You
I've got
got
a
to
very
these
large
days.
family. I have 11 grandchildren,
Oh wow.
and 5
That's a
of them
lot.
live with me. And we have a very, very large household. Not a large house, but a large household. And there's 10 of us here. And 2
I love a
dogs.
good happy family. Big happy
So it's,
families are the best.
I love it. I just love it. I love watching the kids grow up and taking part in their lives, and it's very, very neat to be a grandpa.
Well, George, thank you so much for being the
Again,
voice of
thanks
my
for having
childhood.
me. I appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much.
Everybody like, comment, share, subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.
All righty.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today.